Good afternoon, friends. Today, we're going to talk about retention/duty holsters. So I've been using a retention style duty holster since my time in the Marine Corps, and I'll be honest with you, I don't really count that time because I never really carried it other than for qualifications and for duty in terms of stating SOG as a sergeant of the guard at the barracks. I don't really have any professional experience on the military side of the house with carrying a pistol other than my annual quals, and I don't equate that to shit, to be honest with you. And then when I became a cop 2018, 2019, started carrying Safarilands. I was carrying that in a Beretta. Went to my next agency, which was a tribal agency, carried the level 3 Safariland, level 2 Safariland. And then at my current agency right now, obviously I've been carrying the Alien Gear Rapid Force version 3, and then new holsters are coming into the market, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video, to have a conversation about the holsters that I'm using, what I like, what I don't like, and some pros and cons between the duty holsters that you may find on the market. So before we get too deep into the video, let's talk about what a level 1, 2, or 3 retention holster is. So when we talk about retention, what is retaining the gun, right? So when you look at like a holster like this, so the Alien Gear level 3 Rapid Force duty holster, the first level of retention is the friction of the gun, the friction of the holster squeezing the gun. That is one level of retention. Level 2 would be the ejection port lock, and level 3 is going to be the hood. So there are 3 things essentially holding the gun in place, stopping it from coming out unless you want it to come out. Over the time, I've been seeing companies like Blade Tech and Safariland start saying the level 3 that we've been calling level 3 for the last 5-6 years is actually a level 2, and they're talking about putting, I saw the Blade Tech, they have a guard that goes over the locking systems, or that goes over the buttons that defeat the holster. And I don't necessarily agree with that. The way I look at that is, if I magically were to put an umbrella here, is that level 4? Is that a 4th level of retention? I don't think so. Because if all of these locking mechanisms break, that umbrella or that cover that's covering the buttons does nothing to retain the gun. So when we look at a level 2 or a level 3, we're looking at what is retaining the pistol. So in this case of the Safariland, you have the friction of the holster plus the ALS nub. That's 2. This one being the Blade Tech, which is a manual hood. That's 1. 2, which is their ejection port lock, and then 3 with the friction of the holster, and it's the exact same thing with the Alien Gear Rapid Force level 3 duty holster. So like I mentioned earlier on in my career, I started carrying the Safariland. So I was using the Cordura Wrap Safariland holsters, and I thought these things were the bee's knees. I loved them. Again, I had a Beretta with no weapon light on it, so I was running that for 2 years and some change, and it was actually a really good time. I got proficient with the Safariland level 3s. I liked them a lot, but as the years continued, because I started working with them back in 2017 up to 2019, I started to notice a bunch of issues that I didn't like. Again, nothing will ever beat this holster in terms of intuitiveness, right? So it's very easy to establish a firing grip on the holster, to defeat the retention device, being the ALS nub, and to get the gun out quickly. So the first things that we noticed and we complained about was the closed bottom. So the issue came into play was that when you have the closed bottom holsters, this thing potentially can act like a shovel. So if you're on the ground, whatever reason, if you're fighting somebody and your gun isn't in the holster, or even in a shoot house and brass is bouncing off the walls and back into your holster, even on the line, stuff has a potential to get stuck in there. When you close out the bottom of the holster, you cannot reholster the gun. And there are times in the law enforcement side of the house, probably military and maybe even security, that when you need to reholster this gun, sometimes you need to do it quickly. Again, those are certain use cases. And my career also, I've had to transition from a lethal force role to a hands-on or a less lethal role, and reholstering the gun quickly has become a thing that I've had to do. So I think that's very important. So when you close at the bottom of the holsters, we run into issues. The Safariland obviously has theirs closed. I usually pop this bottom piece out, but if it wasn't for me popping this out, you would see the bottom is closed here. The Valor holster from Blade Tech has it open, and the Alien Gear has at least 2 openings that are large enough to fit stuff through. And if you notice about these two holsters in particular, there is no like hard angles inside the holster so that stuff will get stuck. The issue came into play with the Safariland. There is like a little barrel plug in the inside here, and that's creating some angles where stuff can get lodged in there and get stuck. I've even seen it to where one of my last agencies, we were doing a range day in the snow. Snow ended up getting its way into the holster, long story short. And as we tried to reholster the pistol, we couldn't do so, and we were essentially packing the snow into the holster. So we ran into issues with that. The other thing I will say with the Safariland holsters in general, at least for these ones in particular, the 6390, if you're running a weapon mounted light, there is a potential for, you know, something to get into the trigger and, you know, discharge your firearm. Now, I am a big believer in if that's a worry of yours, you shouldn't be carrying a light because it's going to be very hard to do that with light bearing holsters. So to eliminate that problem in its entirety, don't run a weapon mounted light. But other than that, it's something that we have to learn. There's flaws to every piece of equipment. We have to understand that, learn how to make it work, and then obviously adapt and overcome from there. So I think back in 2022, I went through a Centrifuge's VCQB instructor, and to make a long story short, we had a lot of failures in these holsters. So when I went to that instructor course, I think there was about 18 students in the class. Over half of the class had some sort of Safariland failure, whether it be cracking of the holster, whether that be the ALS snub jumping out of its socket here and not being able to retain the gun, the spring on the ALS portion here breaking, and a bunch of a plethora of different issues. So that's something to take into account. I still carry a holster like this often because like for me, it's nostalgic, and I do love the fact that they make Cordura wraps. The other thing I will add, and this is kind of a coverall for most of the holsters here, companies need to start listening to their end user base and stop allowing third-party companies to make money off things that they refuse to fix. OT Defense makes a nub mod, and he makes essentially modifications for the Blade Tech and the Safariland to essentially fix a problem that people were having in terms of drawing the guns and making it easier. Why can't the companies do that on their own? I don't know, and obviously there's a lot more that goes into that, so we won't really touch on that much more. So the last thing real quick I'll bring up about the Safariland is the website. I hate the website. It's very confusing, and when they make their specific molds for the gun, it's like if you want to run a Surefire, you have to buy the holster for the Surefire. If you want to buy a Streamlight, you have to buy the holster for the Streamlight, and I'm like, dang it. So then you end up spending a bunch of money on it, and it's like that's not something you don't want to do. So I think this one's kind of a generic brand. It's called the it's for the M3 light. So this one in particular is for the M3 light, which I think is their version of like a generic, you know, type of weapon light. So the M3 light was, I think, from Insight Technologies. It was a little black incandescent bulb that fit on the Beretta, and some agencies and organizations are using that a while ago. And I think they kind of use that as a generic mold. So it'll fit an X300. I mean, even with this Gen 6 Glock, it'll still fit in here. There's a lot of play, obviously, but again, it's not designed for this light combination on the holster. But yeah, the website is completely confusing to use, and obviously they're very picky on picking the specific gun with the specific light, which I'm not a fan of. My personal favorite, the Alien Gear Rapid Force level 3 duty holster. So for a while I was running the version 2, no problems at all. The thing that I would notice a lot is that when you shove the gun inside the holster, there's a lot of rattle. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't mind the rattle. If any of these holsters rattled, I really wouldn't care. Even my OG Safarilands are rattling, and the reason why I didn't mind the rattle in particular was because that means a looser tolerance in terms of your gun being able to fit in the holster. So if you have like slide serrations, if you have, you know, grip tape on certain things and different modifications and whatever the case may be, you know it's going to fit, your gun will probably fit into this holster without any issues. I've yet to have an issue where something didn't fit in this thing, regardless of the modifications that I've done to the gun. So that's been great. Also, if the gun is so tight to fit into the holster, so if the gun gets dirt on it or this random stuff gets on the gun or in the holster, you're going to have a significantly harder time with putting the gun away or taking it out, because that's adding more friction. If there's loose gaps in between the body of the holster and the gun itself, like, you know, again, it's a little bit loose, those are things that like can fall between the cracks, which is going to be kind of nice. So because of that, no matter how dirty my gun has gotten, I have had no issues with reholstering and pulling the gun out. So that's been a plus for sure. I've seen some inconsistencies in the making of the holster. So like, I remember I've had a spring snap, which is the spring portion for the actual hood. And then I reached out to Alien Gear. Alien Gear said, hey, that was a bad batch of springs. We're going to fix it. So if anyone has any issues, we'll get it taken care of. So I'm like, okay, cool. You messed up, but you owned your mistake. I'll take that any day of the week. and also is the lack of holsters that they do make for different types of firearms. So here we have a 17 holster. It'll fit a 19, cool. It'll fit a 17, cool. Problem is, what if I have a 34? So I can't do that unless I chop the bottom, which I don't want to do. They haven't made a staccato holster yet. They haven't really made anything. And I understand, having spoke to the company, how difficult it is for all these companies to essentially come out with the molds to, you know, design a holster around a firearm. So I get it, but it's something that we obviously can't negate because there's a lot of guns coming out on the market, and we want holsters for said guns. So that's obviously very difficult, and they have to read the room in terms of what they deem is going to be popular, what's not going to be popular, what gun's going to take off, and what's worth their investment. And that's for all three companies. So it's a very difficult thing to understand, especially if I'm not behind the scenes. But again, I'm not stupid, and I could kind of like read between the lines here. Another plus of mine that I would say I like about this holster, in the past when we have broken the springs for the hood, the gun can still be retained, which is awesome. So it's just, you won't get that snappy hood return. But in the past, when we've snapped the spring in here, the hood needs to be manually essentially pushed up, and it will stay there. And if you press this button, it's more like a really like dull push instead of a really snappy push. So again, even if the retention system does fail, it is still retaining your gun with all three levels of retention, which is super nice. For the alien gear, the website's really easy. Large light, small light. It's very, very easy. So in this case, I have like an alien gear with a small light on it. So I have a Surefire XC3 on a Gen 6 Glock. It's small light, so any one of the small lights, a nightstick, a stream light, a Surefire, it'll all fit in here with no issues at all. The good thing is too, even that will fit there. This will also fit there, retain it, and absolutely have no issues with, you know, putting the gun in the holster. With the lights and stuff, it's like, even with the large light type of model, TLR1s, Surefires, nightsticks, all those types of like weapon light brands, they will always fit into the holster, and you don't need to pick a specific holster. So a super cool feature with the Rapid Force is the fact that if you unholstered the firearm or whatever that case may be, and you needed to reholster the gun again, and you don't want to have to reach down and manipulate the retention devices, all you have to do is take your light or your muzzle, smack it on that actual release here, and you can absolutely return the gun back to where it needs to be, and you won't run into any issues with that. So that's super cool. They thought about that. I do not like the fact that they took off the retention tab. So there was like an old screw back here that you used to be able to tighten and loosen to adjust a retention. They took that off, and I don't necessarily agree with that, because what if I do want a tight holster for whatever reason? I want to be able to have that option. And if I wanted to have a loose one, I also wanted to be able to have that option. So at the current agency I work at, I've been shot at twice. And the funniest part about that is my noisy equipment on my body, whether that be keys or from other people or like slings bouncing up and down, is never the thing that gave me away. What gave me away is that I'm in a profession where I have to say, police. I have to identify myself and announce my presence. So in both instances where I received active gunfire, it was because we announced ourselves. So that's something to consider. Again, I've never found an instance where my gear, earlier on in my career when I was running keys on my belt, that never gave me away. Now, for the Blade Tech Valor holster. So far, I've liked it. Actually, the holster actually has been working pretty well. It's super nice because it's a very generic holster. You could adjust the depth. Their website's really easy to work with. They have a bunch of stuff that ships with the holster that you can accessorize. So if I wanted to put a tourniquet mount here for their tech mount stuff, that's super chill. If I wanted to put a 34, a 17, a 19 in this holster, I can do that. And I can also pick which bottom end cap I want to use for this particular holster. So I made it to where it was super long so that I could obviously house a 34 into this holster. One thing that Blade Tech did sell me on aggressively that I ended up buying for all of my holsters was their tech mount. So if you notice, every single one of my holster has this little disc. I am a big fan of this for the ease, for the ability to cant the holster however I want to do so without having to unscrew stuff and screw stuff back in. And it's a really quick, simple pull of a tab. Very easy to do so. And again, very, very, very user-friendly for this thing. This could be a pro, it could be a con, depending on how you look at it. This one singular button activates 2 levels of retention. So we have this button that activates the hood, and this button that releases the nub that catches into the ejection port lock. Now, on the topic of this specific button, this is an aftermarket piece from OT Defense. He made this button, and in my opinion, it was an upgrade in comparison to the old button. The old button was super like recessed and had some kind of a ramp to it, and I honestly didn't like it. It made it very inconsistent for me to draw the gun. If you'll notice, and I'll put some B-roll in here, I have a hot spot whenever I'm trying to draw this gun. So whenever I try to establish a firing grip on this gun, the web of my hand is making contact with the bail of the holster. So whenever I drive my hand down as fast as I can to try to pull this gun out, I end up smashing the web of my hand on the hood. And I am not a fan of it, which is the reason why I haven't been using it as much. I actually reached out to Blade Tech and had conversations with them over their social media, and I spoke to some people on the phone, and they were super kind, very respectful, open to feedback, all that other stuff. And I just told them that I did not like this piece. And they said they have some fixes coming, but they're like, hey, that's the old version. I'm like, well, the unfortunate part is this is the version that I have. So maybe the older version, but this is what I have, and this is what I got from their website. And they actually did send this to me about 6, maybe 7 months ago, so I have been testing it for quite some time. And again, the holster does a really good job of retaining the gun. It doesn't rattle if that's what you're looking for. It's open bottom. It's pretty easy, intuitive to use. But again, with all these other holsters, if I were to use the Alien Gear, very easy to pull out. If I use the Safariland, very easy to pull out. So when I did speak to Blade Tech, they had mentioned that they're going to be releasing different and new buttons for this portion of the holster in their newer generations that are coming out. And I know they're coming out with a bunch of different holsters for different types of guns. So overall, I think the biggest thing for me when it comes to picking a new duty holster or using a certain duty holster, I think it needs to be fast, durable, and obviously repeatable. Sometimes with certain holsters you can get lucky with the draw, and it's like a good draw once in a while and you get lucky. Obviously repetition and training is always going to be the biggest thing. I've been on this holster and training with it aggressively, and it's the one holster in which I actually have to like turn and orient my wrist in a different, or my thumbs in a different direction in order to get the gun out quickly. The other two, like the Safariland and the Alien Gear, don't require me to do anything. I just have to essentially grab for the gun and move my thumbs, and I could release the gun from the holster. When it comes to the Blade Tech, I obviously have to do something different, and I wish they would change this design in particular, which I think they might be. I'm not 100%. I'm always looking for a holster that's going to be fast. So these guns, majority of the time, will stay in the holster, but when you need them quickly. I mean, obviously a fast draw isn't the most important thing in the world, right? There's a lot of different factors, hence why I also say durability for these holsters. If I were to rate these for speed, the Alien Gear would be number one. The Alien Gear is the fastest holster that I currently use, and it's the reason why I keep using it. The most durable also, I would either go to either the Blade Tech or the Alien Gear. I've tested the Alien Gear in a lot of different environments, brought that to a lot of different classes. It's been crushed. I've ran it over with a car. Absolutely had no issues with this thing. This thing won't die. Just feeling the construction of the Blade Tech, I also feel that this thing would be very, very durable. I haven't tested it. I've seen some pull testing of this thing done, and the pull tests are great. Majority of these holsters, I'll be honest with you, a lot of the time the gun breaks before the holster does, but the companies won't say that, and that's I understand it. It could cause some drama. So you guys know the Alien Gear will always be my favorite until one of these companies decide to make something new that's going to completely throw this to the corner. And until that point, I'll be continuing to use my Alien Gear. Obviously, it's my favorite holster. And you ask any of the guys that shoot with the Alien Gear a lot, they're fast out of the holster and it retains the gun. Obviously, like I mentioned, it's one of the more important factors here. This video is designed to kind of like show you guys and showcase my mentality when it comes to looking at duty holsters in particular, and what I'm looking for in the holsters and what I'm using and why I'm using it. You guys know in the past I've made videos on the Alien Gear, and I've also made videos on how to draw quickly from the Alien Gear and the Safariland holsters. Big problem was the account was removed, so it's kind of nice because I get to start fresh again with letting you guys know what I like and what I don't like, and obviously get an opportunity to redo these videos the way I wish I would have done them the first time. So you guys know, like I mentioned, all these holsters have pros and have their cons to them. There may be some that I didn't mention, which I might touch on a little bit later after the edit of this video. Who knows? I might end up putting a thing of B-roll in here and then throwing audio over it if there is something that I missed indefinitely. But with that, I have nothing else for you guys. Remember, be a dude, don't be a dick, take care, love ya, and we'll see you guys on the next video.